So the great myth is that you're alone, and it feels incredibly alone is the first thing, but you're not alone. And to find a community, and not a community who keep you in victimhood and poor me,
Mhm.
because that just keeps you stuck. Find people, even if it's one person, right? Like my guardian angel, who would force me to be better. Like not force in a nasty way, but just through love, kept me on the path that I wanted um, to be on.
Welcome to Single Parent Success Stories, a podcast designed to inspire single parents. Here you'll find resources from self care to finances to parenting and everything in between. Discover what it takes to thrive. Let the stories inspire you to what is possible. Hello and welcome to Single Parent Success Stories. Today we have a special guest, Kim Korven, joining us from Regina, Canada. Kim is a retired lawyer and a judge of landlord and tenant disputes, mom, divorcee, and mediator who supports families in conflict. Unlike anyone else in this industry, Kim does not approach divorce as a legal issue. Instead, Kim helps parents stop walking on eggshells so that they and their children can thrive during and beyond divorce. This is true even in challenging circumstances such as coercive control, narcissism, and mental health issues. Kim lives in Regina, Canada with her second husband, one of her adult children from her first marriage, and rescue greyhounds and cats. Kim is the third generation of her family to steward 160 acres of prairie. Welcome, Kim. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Irina. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So please share with us who you are. Who is Kim in your own words?
So I'm somebody who was really bad at relationships and ended up getting married in my early 30s and planned to be married for life, right? Like I was very, very focused on career, hence, and I traveled first, but then the legal career. And and I got married, and I remember when my husband proposed to me, we were at a national park, and he gets down on one knee, and there's a diamond ring, and my whole body was screaming, "Say no!" And all I could think about, I lived completely in my head, was, but that he's going to cry. I don't know. I can't handle it if he cries. And then I thought about the 8-hour drive home.
Oh,
And it was like, oh, that would be so uncomfortable, right? Like, yuck. Never picturing, well, a lifetime of that. So, in the split second that I had those thoughts, I said yes.
oh wow.
And so when it came time, so not surprisingly, our marriage was rocky. And and I was 3 years kind of like, oh, should I
Mhm.
stay? Should I go? And I'm losing my train of thought, but there you go. But it was actually, that's when I remembered about when he proposed,
Mhm.
was when I had made the decision to end. And it was crap. I can't blame him because I didn't listen to my instincts.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I became a single parent.
Right. Yes, oftentimes we don't listen to our inner guidance. We think of just with a head. And when a body is screaming no, we
Yeah, like it was,
scream back.
right? Yeah, like it was like he's going to cry. I can't cope with that. never stopping to think, what's the impact on me long term?
Right, right.
But it was, it was a powerful memory in terms of the journey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had also experienced, I remember working on a child protection file representing mom when the government had taken away her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And mom had involved a social worker who would always say, kids love their parents no matter what. So when I was facing the end of my marriage, I remember that very, very clearly. And even though I could hardly stand to look at my husband, like my daughter was 2.5 when we left, and she slept with me the whole time. And part of that was avoiding him, right? But it was just like, so it wasn't like I wanted to be kind to him. I didn't. But I just knew, okay, for the sake of my kids. And so I sat, I just wanted my kids to have the best relationship possible with their dad. And I knew they'd have a really great relationship. Remember my son, when he was about 6, asking me, Mom, how, how can I change my name? I want to change my name. And he has his dad's last name, and I never changed mine, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was wanting to change his first name. He was wanting to change his last name. He was wanting this closer, overt relationship with mom and a wall with his dad.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it. I'm thinking it's his first name. I went into the whole head space
Mm-hmm.
and thought, well, and explained the legal concept. It's a 6-year-old. It said, when you're 12 or 13, if you still feel this way, talk to me again, and I'll talk to your dad about it.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time he was 12 or 13, he didn't want to change his name anymore. It was a beautiful thing.
Mm. What happened, I call it, during when you became a single parent? Were there any challenges or struggles you faced, or everything went smoothly?
Oh, it was not smooth at all. Um, well, from my perspective, it wasn't smooth at all. On the outside, it looked pretty good. Um, I had expected my parents, for example, to be supportive of this change because they used to say to me, Kim, come on, because they'd seen some of the interactions. But when I asked my husband to move out, there was no emotional support. And looking back on it now, it's like, well, it wasn't meant to be a slight to me. It's they don't know how to provide that kind of the support I needed. So that was one challenge. And when I asked him to leave, I had my own business operating this little legal practice out of my house, and my self-esteem was in the toilet,
Mm.
right? Because I'm feeling like a failure. I'm married for life, and this happened.
Mm-hmm.
I had to make this really difficult decision. And I remember there was one law firm in town that I really liked. Sorry about that. That I really liked. And one day I thought, oh, it would be so great to work there. And they ended up phoning me and saying, hey, we want you to come and work here, which was a beautiful, beautiful thing, right? Like it was really, and they accepted that I only wanted to work 3 days a week. But what was bubbling up inside me is when I attended law school in my last year, one of my profs was from Scotland, And I really wanted to go to Scotland and do my master's study under her. And instead of doing that right after law school, I listened to my mentors who said, Kim, you need to practice first to have any kind of credibility. And I listened to them once again instead of following my heart. And when my son was a baby, I actually got a letter from the College of Law where I had studied in a different city. And it was from the dean saying, there'd be a shortage of professors. We need people with conceptual brains. Would you consider kind of your master's and thinking about a career in academia? And I was very excited to get that. And, I shared it with my husband, and but we're established here, Kim. You have a job. I have a job. Like, this would disrupt everything. And once again, I gave up on me, the people pleasing, as so many of us do in relationships. We don't put our needs first. So I said, okay. But after we separated, that dream bubbled up. And, being in school was always a place where I felt comfortable. And the firm I was with, we actually merged with another firm, and that resulted in a cultural change. It wasn't as much fun. And somehow, I think, of course, when you feel like you're at rock bottom, you're prepared to do things differently. There's this sense there's nothing left to lose. So why not?
Mm-hmm.
Because logically, it was a really stupid thing to do, to rent out my house, put my legal career on hold, and take my kids, right? It didn't make any sense because in the legal profession, if anything, it's looked out on with some suspicion at some firms, right? So it made no sense, but it was this powerful, powerful force in me. And I had a friend say, oh, yeah, you can bring the kids, and they were 4 and 9 at the time. You can bring the kids, age 4 and 9, and 2 greyhounds, and come and stay with us. We're going to be doing lots of traveling. We need somebody in the house with a teenager, the 19-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to jump off the cliff and do it. And, and renting my house, I remember my assistant at the law firm, because I'm thinking, I'm not going to find somebody. I'm not going to find somebody, because the person who I had lined up backed out.
Mm-hmm.
And my assistant said, Kim, why don't you think about it from the perspective of you find the best possible tenant? So 4 days before we were due to leave, I found a tenant.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I didn't know how I was going to fund it. I thought if I have to cash out my retirement, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
And I got there and discovered, oh, the tuition for the master's program was incredibly low.
Mm-hmm.
And I got scholarships. Like, I had never known I graduated number 4 in my class originally. So that meant scholarships. And they got me jobs doing research and teaching assistants. And it was hard. Like, it was great and it was hard because I remember the first class I had to take was legal theory, which you might imagine that's terribly stimulating, right? Exactly. It was so dense, right? And there I am. I've been out of university for 15 years, and I'm having to read this really dense, dry stuff. And it's taking me an hour to read 6 pages. So talk about demoralizing. And I remember, just being in tears over that. But then thinking about my grandmother, who at age 50 went back to university to finish her education degree. And that was older than me. And I just thought, oh, if Isabel did it, I can do it too. She was older than me and she went back to school and successfully got through. I can too. And that's when I chose to be kind to me and to show myself some grace. And most things got easier then. But, so that was kind of the essence of reclaiming me and the rebirth of me, and paying attention to what mattered. And it wasn't this light switch, but it was the essence of going, yeah, what I want to do, it matters.
Yeah, totally. How did you navigate your challenges of single parenthood?
Oh boy. Well, I ended up, it's funny, I'm just thinking, in terms of support network, because I had been, when we were still here, right? Like I came back to this house after my master's, same house I lived in with my first husband, and I live in with my second husband, raised my kids here. But I'd had a neighbor when I was still with my first husband who was elderly, and her kids were kind of less than stellar, shall we say, and no grandkids. And we became very, very good friends. And she kind of looked on my daughter as her granddaughter. Right? Like I would just take my daughter, if I had to do running around for my legal business and my daughter was napping, I would just take her to Edith's house and stick her in bed with Edith because I had a key, and they would nap together. But Edith ended up needing to move into a home and her mental faculties were declining. The kids and I and the greyhounds would go and visit her every Sunday afternoon. And one day when I was there, I asked the worker, because my house was complete shambles, as you can imagine, right? Like everything felt so very, very hard. And it was like I was just holding on by my fingertips. So I asked this woman if she would be interested in coming and cleaning my house. And she said no, but she said my aunt might be interested. And so I met her aunt, First Nations woman. They both are First Nations. And her aunt became my guardian angel. And so when my kids would be sick and I had to be at work, there were days when I would ask this woman, can you just come? And she helped me pack everything up when I went to do my master's. And just complete emotional support. And she was instrumental in helping me through that transition. Right? Like she saw through my bullshit, She saw through the mask. She knew she'd been there.
Yeah.
And but it was really through her support.
Yeah. We need people in our life to give us something we don't see in ourselves. And sometimes the emotional piece is so important.
Well, and it's being open to that support finding us when we really need it. Right? Like, and I remember during that time, we had, elders from the Church of Latter-day Saints knock on my door one time. I think this is when I was still married, but it was, the really bad stage. And my son brought out a pile of clean underwear. And I'm just like, and the house is a mess. And they're asking me, can we help you clean? And I'm feeling completely demoralized. No, can we pray for you? Yes, please do. It's the support we're okay with, and sometimes we're not okay with it.
Yeah, totally. What advice can you share for single parents who are just stepping onto the journey of single parenting?
So the great myth is that you're alone, and it feels incredibly alone is the first thing, but you're not alone. And to find a community, and not a community who keep you in victimhood and poor me, because that just keeps you stuck. Find people, even if it's one person, right? Like my guardian angel, who would force me to be better. Like not force in a nasty way, but just through love, kept me on the path that I wanted to be on. And the second thing is, if you can act from a place of kindness and show yourself grace, like it's going to be messy. It is messy. It's okay. The interesting thing for my kids, and as a parent, as a single parent, my kids and I ended up living in family residence at the university because living with friends wasn't such a smart thing to do, but it helped me take the plunge. It was part of my addiction to all of that drama and adrenaline, I think, is why I had to shift there first. So my kids and I were living in an apartment of 635 square feet, which was significant downsize because my house on 2 floors is about 2,100 square feet. So they had to share a bedroom. Like it was, and it was the best time of our lives, right? Because it's not about providing them with stuff. It's about you being happy and being in a good space and finding something that brings you joy. And it can be just something so very, very small. Like if you like singing, join a choir. Or you like music, have a dance party with your kids every morning. It will make a world of difference. So that would be the advice I would share.
I love that. Find what makes you happy, and it doesn't have to be a little thing. For myself, I was looking to be happy again, and I kind of had maybe a midlife crisis. I didn't know who I was anymore. I'm just someone else's mom and someone else's spouse, but who I was, I no longer knew.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find what makes me happy. And
I think that's likely why I went back to university, because university had been a happy place. I hadn't seen that till right now, but that's what it was about, kind of the going home where you're safe.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of advice would you give to your younger self?
I would give my younger self advice to listen to those voices in your head, Kim, that say no, 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 or that say do this. Like pay attention, you matter, you have worth. Just because you exist, that's enough. And I think also follow the joy instead of following, oh, this is the path you need to be on.
Yeah, sometimes we envision a straight path, but it could be a lot of different navigating points.
I think that's life, isn't it? For all of us.
Yeah, yeah,
The straight path is the illusion. Yeah.
yeah. So during our earlier discussion, you also mentioned, that you discovered that you were terrified of divorce when your marriage was ending, and which led you to create a different approach, one where law doesn't dominate. And how did you also discover some of the, techniques or tips to negotiate with a narcissist?
So, in spite of my not listening to my intuition, I do listen to my intuition a lot of times.
Mhm.
And if it's for techniques and process, I've been more inclined to listen to it than the emotional piece. I'm getting better at the emotional piece. Yeah, so I was terrified of divorce. I'd had clients fight over spices. I kid you not, they had to call in a mediator. So it wasn't just towels, it was spices. That's how bizarre it was. Like I had seen it all. And in that remembering when I got engaged and going, okay, I can't blame him, it shifted how I told him. So I didn't say, you're a loser, you're this, you're that. I had remembered some of my favorite memories of him, and I shared one. And I said, we haven't had an experience like that in years. And our kids deserve us to be better. Like we are not setting a good example for them. And I want them to know us at our best because then they can be at their best. And the other thing I had done is I'd actually crafted a list. Okay, here's what we're going to do. So basically, I just told him, like, I think it's a myth to think, well, we can negotiate, we're going to figure this out together. Sometimes you can figure it out together. Sometimes the other person just needs a chance to catch up, but you don't have to hold off. That was what I learned from that process. And the thing about the law, like we tend to put law on this pedestal. All the law is, it's government saying, okay, in this type of relationship, these are the minimum standards of behavior. And when you think about divorce, it's about ending your marriage. And it's also about who's going to make decisions about the kids. Where are the children going to live? What are we going to do with our stuff, our day-to-day stuff? How are we going to fund this change so the children aren't harmed? Right? And how do we divide our investments and debt? That's the essence of the legal issues. When you phrase them like that, they're way less intimidating, and people are so much more creative, right? And the other thing is, of course, I recognized I loved him once. I loved him enough to have children with him.
Mm.
It would have diminished me not to show him grace. And there were times like he could talk and I would be furious in less than a second. So I was not this angel, but it was this profound commitment to the children. And people who knew both of us, because he actually liked to fight, he was very combative. People who knew both of us would say, Kim, how did you do it? And I'm just like, oh, anybody can do it. Divorcing peacefully. So maybe it's, and I think part of it is I read people very well, not just what they're showing, but what's underneath. And I think that's part of figuring out how to negotiate with a narcissist and having learned from some of the difficult situations that I have been in my life. And there have been several. Okay. So negotiating with a narcissist, there's a couple of baseline points to remember. One is they're not going to change. They're not acting this way in response to you. They're acting this way because it is who they are. So the two of you living in separate households, he's going to be the same person. And if a person can accept that, because there is a tendency to go, oh, we're not together, blame ourselves, he's going to be different. There's also a tendency with the people pleasing to go, I'm just going to be reasonable and then he'll be reasonable. Ask yourself, was he ever reasonable in the relationship? What was his dominant way of being? If he wasn't, like, if being reasonable was 1 day a year or 2 days a year, he's not going to be reasonable. So you cannot, and the other thing with negotiation, you cannot start out at your bottom line position where your line in the sand is. You need to have room to move. Because the thing about a narcissist needs to feel like he is winning. And for a narcissist, winning is at the expense of your position. So you must guard your position. And if you can, you don't let them know what is your number one concern, because then that's really where they're going to want to slay you, right? It's this beautiful game of chicken, and being very, very clear on this is what is most important. And I mean, when I work with people one-on-one, I help them with that strategy and getting really clear on what's important. But those would kind of be, and I actually on my website, right, like there's a blog post about negotiating with a narcissist. And there's also the freebie to sign up for is the flow chart that I used. I created it from my divorce about how to divorce peacefully. What steps do you follow? Right? And it doesn't start with running to a lawyer. It starts with committing, I'm doing this for the kids. And sees a person doing a lot of legwork first before consulting a legal expert.
I love it. You're so right. Peaceful resolution is always best.
Well, and we tend to think peace, oh, it's this namby-pamby kumbaya concept. Peace is an active verb, right? And if peace was easy, we wouldn't have these major conflicts in the world. And the other thing is we are not taught how to have these conversations that we label as difficult. And I'm actually a conflict avoider, is where I started from. Very passive aggressive. And I laugh, right? Because I've seen it and I've had the training. And what happens in my practice is as I work with other people, I get better personally at all of this. And people are beautiful. Most people are wanting to do the best jobs that they can. Even the narcissists, a lot of them, I just think, hurt people. And what's really beautiful, even in my mediation practice, is when I get parents really focusing on their kids in a way they never have before, a lot of those walls are minimized, and parents are having really great discussions for the first time in years.
Yeah, this is true. I found it during my divorce as well. We finally were talking about important things as opposed to before there was no conversation.
No, I know. And we get so busy and we think that the most important things are, a nice house and, and the kids are in activities and they have tablets and it's not the most important. Like having a secure environment is very important. And part of that is decrease the tension, which is one of the reasons why it's so important to divorce peacefully. Because if you divorce the conventional way and it ends up high conflict, the tension remains and the kids are still living in that every day. Doesn't help them. Then you see behavioral issues, academic issues.
Yeah, so true.
But yeah, it is the great irony that you need to divorce to have a good conversation with your spouse. And there's an element of closure that creates, right? That you don't get when you work with lawyers because you never talk to each other like that.
That's true. Speaking of kids, what do you think is the most important trait to instill in a child?
I think, oh, there's so many good ones. I mean, kindness, okay, and responsibility for your own, because we can't protect our kids from life. We think we can, but life is going to happen. They're going to face adversity. So if they know they're loved, if they know kindness, they can learn resilience, right? Like, which is bouncing back. It's, yeah, bad things happen. It's okay. What can you learn from this? But I think for kids to know they're loved unconditionally is actually, and that isn't the big room, the fancy tablet. That's actually seeing your kids and doing the hard things for them. Does that make sense?
Of course. Yes, those are important traits. And yeah, the kindness and resilience and loving unconditionally, so they know that no matter what happens, they have a place to come back to. They have a parent who sees them just for who they are without having to change them.
Yeah, that parent to come back to, it's a beautiful expression. And what's interesting, even if you're divorced from a narcissist, children are attracted to the light. Like all living creatures actually are attracted to light. And what happens, so that's why it's vitally important for one parent to be the light, right? To have some joy. No, but it's like me going back to do my master's.
Right.
I was the light. I was doing what brought me joy. I could be fully present for my kids. And we tend to think, oh, they're with the other parent half time. Yeah, they are, which means you need to be like, it gives you a week of space for you to do your work, to stay grounded. So when you're with your kids, you can be that unconditional love. And it isn't about, like, I remember a conversation with my daughter when she wasn't wanting to go to her dad's. And we ended up, and I'm like, and it turned out it was over the routine. She was bored at his place. And I'm like, yes, you always have macaroni and cheese on Tuesday nights at dad's. But with me, we can eat anytime between 5 and 9, and it can be a bowl of cereal. So the reality is you're being exposed to two very different ways of being. That's a really good life skill as an adult.
Yeah.
Because we can't control everything. And, you don't always like my behavior, do you? And she's, no, I don't. I'm like, I know, but you love me. And it's the same with dad. You don't have to separate that behavior that you don't like from the love, right? And that's how to be the light. I didn't diminish her dad. I own that I'm a human. This is all okay. And it's when we get caught in that victimhood, we can't be the light. We're not being the best parents we can be.
True.
That's just my humble opinion. Like, what do I know?
True. Was there a book that has inspired you on your journey or had transformed your life in any way?
I think the book when I was I'd been separated for just over a year, and I was, hanging on
Mhm.
by my fingernails. Was Elizabeth Lesser, is her name, Lesser, a book called Broken Open. And it's a series of essays. And the two that I remember the most, one is about we're all bozos on the bus, because I used to look at other people and go, they have it so together. Why am I such a hot mess? Right?
I guess some people are better at, I call it, wearing their
Well,
mask.
but this essay was so great because it was all about they're just bozos on a different bus. We're all bozos, and it was just such a relief. That was the one essay, and the other one, she has an essay in there about her experience when she was newly separated and how her kids were acting and how she just, it was such a perfect expression of how I was feeling. And so with that, I didn't feel so alone.
Awesome, awesome. So the first one you said Elizabeth Lesser, Lesser.
Yeah, and the book is called Broken Open.
Mhm.
And
Right.
I liked it enough. I'd given away my copy, and a
Mhm.
few years ago, I bought it on Amazon. I'm like, I need this book.
Yeah, I love that, we're all bozos on different buses.
Yeah, like it was just so, because up until then, I was still in this, I've got to be perfect at everything,
Mhm.
or I will crumble. And it gave me permission to be me, to start
Yeah,
showing up as me.
yeah. I think we have this concept of, perfectionism, and when we're growing up, like everything has to be in control. You gotta know everything 10 steps ahead, 10 years in the future. And when divorce happens, when challenges happen, we suddenly find ourselves in this uncharted territory where we have to guide our new course on how to navigate. And for myself, I was discovering what the new normal is, because normal was having two parents and happy
No.
children and all in the same household, because everyone around me was like that, and I was this outlier, a single parent, not
Well, and
knowing what next step to take.
I remember, exactly like when I was thinking about divorce, it's who were the role models. And I could think of two women who were really good moms, had really good kids, and dads really weren't in the picture.
Mhm.
And once I remembered that, it was like, okay, it is possible, right? It was like, but that perfectionism, I mean, that was how I was seen in my family of origin, right? I
Mhm.
had to be perfect to feel loved. So it was this real, oh gosh, like it was so very, very tough.
Is there anything I haven't asked that you would like to share?
I think we've had a good discussion, and you've got me to say things I don't, you know, don't always share and look at things differently. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you. If people would love to connect with you or learn more about you, where would they go?
So my website, I actually have two, but the one with all the resources on divorce is theconflictqueen.ca. Or if it's easier to remember, you can also get to it with gentlewaydivorce.com.
All right, awesome. We'll include everything in episode notes. It was a pleasure to have you and learn from you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. It took me back, and it's like, yeah, it's a tough spot, and just that grace, be kind to yourself, right? And know you're acting out of love for your kids in doing this, and that will carry you through.
Yeah, thank you.